Hey there. So, very, very welcome to part 28 of 40. The action is really heating up right now in the End Time series. But just before we look at what transpires on the plains of Megiddo at Armageddon, let's have a look all the way back in Genesis at the Third Heavenly Rebellion. It's quite important to understand the enemy's first attempt to really bring in the end of days in order to understand the operations of the evil forces in the future. Because as Ecclesiastes tells us, there's nothing new under the sun. And the present calls the past to account so that we can see the tactics that the enemy used before to defeat the forces of evil in our time. And that will continue to be true for the tribulation saints as well. Okay, so in Genesis 10, starting at verse 8, it says, Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. Now, it doesn't say he was a Nephilim or a Gibborim, which is what mighty warrior means, but he became one. That means through a combination of science and sorcery, he manipulated his own DNA to become a post-flood Nephilim. Were there Nephilim on the earth after the flood? Yes, we saw that a few episodes ago when Ham looked at his father Noah naked. So Noah cursed the genealogy of Ham, beginning with his son Canaan, the father of the Canaanites, and many other wicked post-flood Nephilim nations. By activating the Nephilim DNA in Ham's wife, in Canaan's mother. But here, this is Cush's line. This isn't Ham's line. This is a different strand of Noah's family tree. But these ones are manipulating science and sorcery and ancient technologies, probably given to them by demonic forces. And ultimately they created the Gibborim, a new generation of Nephilim. And let's look at how powerful Nimrod was. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ur, Calah, and Resen, which is between Nineveh and Calah, which is a great city. So he created incredible centers of power and influence, his own dynasty, his own empire. The Jewish Talmud has this to say about Nimrod. He was a mighty hunter of the souls of men, a mass murderer. Now, historians say that Nimrod married his mother, Semiramis, but she was a bit of a skank. And one day, while he was off in battle, she did the nasty with another man, got pregnant by him, and then she said that the sunlight was actually Nimrod. After he died, he became the sun, and he'd impregnated her miraculously. A counterfeit, immaculate conception. She got pregnant with a baby, Tammuz, who she said was Nimrod regenerated, reborn. So Nimrod was effectively her son, her husband, and kind of her grandson. It's all very, very messed up. The ancient historian Flavius Josephus had this to say about Nimrod, especially with regards to his city Babel and what became Babylon. Now, it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man of great strength of hand. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it was through his means that they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage that procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence on his own power. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It should. That is almost every government on the earth today. He also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, bring about another flood. For that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. Now the multitudes were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod, and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God. And they built a tower, neither sparing any pains, nor being in any degree negligent about the work. They were wholeheartedly committed. And by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, it grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect. But the thickness of it was so great, and it was strongly built, that thereby its great height seemed upon the view to be less than it really was. It was built of burnt brick, cemented together with mortar, made of bitumen, that it might not be liable to admit water. So if God flooded the earth again, this would remain, this would stand. In Nebuchadnezzar's day, centuries later, there was a temple in Babylon called the Etemenanki. This was a ziggurat. Ziggurats are like stepping stone temple towers. And it means the house of the foundation of heaven and earth in Sumerian. It was seen as a counterfeit Eden, place where heaven and earth collided, connected, were one. The priests tried to appease a variety of gods by offering a series of sacrifices and magical incantations atop Nebuchadnezzar's tower. I'm going to give you a summary of this inscription from those days. To ground its bottom on the breast of the netherworld, it was seen as connecting earth and the afterlife. Make its top vie with the heavens, it was to compete with heaven itself. The great gods made the truth known to me. So they were having angelic, or at least spiritual, encounters, revealing the tactics, the tool, the techniques, the strategies. In its foundations I laid out gold, silver, and gemstones from mountain and sea. They impoverished themselves to this. This was an idol. Building these ziggurats, because it was not just one. The Tower of Babel speaks of one, but look at any country affiliated with Nimrod, and you'll find remnants of these. They built atop red earth. Adam, or Adam, means Edom or red, probably because he was made from red dirt. And I had sail baskets made of gold and silver. So basically, people poured the riches of the earth, which God had given them to live wealthy lives, not to be dependent on governments, but to serve Him. And instead, they offered it up to this idol, this building, this monstrosity that they created with their own hands. Even in the land of Ur, which is where Abram came from, there's a ziggurat, which was built in honor of Nana, the moon god. According to the Assyriologist, historian of Assyria, and linguist Archibald Sayce, the primitive pictographs of the Uruk era, again Uruk was established by Nimrod, suggest that stone was scarce, but was already cut into bricks and sealed. Brick was the ordinary building material, and with it cities, forts, temples, and houses were constructed. The city was provided with towers and stood on an artificial platform. The house also had a tower-like appearance. It was provided with a door which turned on a hinge and could be opened with a sort of key. The city gate was on a larger scale and seemed to have been double. Demons were feared. Thus, sacrifices were made to them, and magical incantations were practiced. In Uruk, some observations have been made by historians. Ziggurat designs ranged from simple bases upon which a temple sat to marvels of mathematics and construction, which spanned several terraced stories and were topped with a temple. An example of a simple ziggurat is the White Temple of Uruk in ancient Sumer. The ziggurat itself is the base on which the White Temple is set. Its purpose is to get the temple closer to the heavens and provide access from the ground to it via steps. And the Mesopotamians believe that these pyramid temples connected heaven and earth. Even regarding Babylon, one ancient text says that the bricks were more valuable than a man. To drop a brick, it could take a long time to get it back up again. If a man fell and died, well, who cares? No problem. Some historians, some people say they're outlandish, but humans have always been intelligent, and these guys lived for a very long time, think that maybe the Babylonians even had a machine which could match the weight of the bricks and actually hoist them up in the air using frequencies to aid with the building projects. But effectively, what the enemy was doing here was creating a counterfeit Eden. If you read the story of the Great Flood, it talks about underwater oceans, which you can't see in the map. Then you've got the seas, which you can see. Then you've got the land. Then you've got the mountains. Eden, Ezekiel 28 tells us, was a garden atop a mountain. It says, Lucifer, you're in my garden, Eden, on my holy mount, on my mountain. So Eden was a garden on a mountain. And if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see how the Babylonians thought the world looked. Again, they believed in underwater oceans. And then there were seas. And land. And then for them, their temple towers were built on mountains, and they had gardens on top of them. And just like in the Garden of Eden, you had many kinds of trees which are good for eating, good to look at. But you also had two supernatural ones, the Tree of Life and the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil. In Babylon, and the Tower of Babel, you also had sacred trees as well. It's a perfect counterfeit. It's for men to have an encounter with the divine by excluding God, not on Jesus' terms. So the form of a Sumerian temple is manifestation of Near Eastern cosmology, which described the world as a disk of land, a flat earth, which was surrounded by a salt water ocean, both of which floated on another sea of fresh water called Apsu. And above them was a hemispherical firmament which regulated time. A world mountain formed an axis mundi that joined all three layers. They saw these places as very, very sacred, especially the gardens. And the structures were rectangular in shape and had four sides to represent four mystical rivers flowing from them. Why four? Because in the Garden of Eden, you have the river, like the River of Life, which breaks into four rivers. So you had evil demons who saw what Eden looked like And they impressed this upon Nimrod and those under him, and so they tried to recreate it in their time. In Genesis 11, 5-9, you get the Lord's response to this. But even the Armenian historian Moses Cheronisis confirms the Bible history account that God overthrew Babel Tower, but he elaborates that it wasn't just that the Lord stopped its building, but actually that he sent a terrible storm. So he changed the languages of the people so that they couldn't communicate, but also sent a storm to destroy it. That's what he says. But when the threatenings of the mighty God are fulfilled, which he threatened mortals once, when in Assyrian land they built a tower. Now, Assyria and Babylon are different empires, but Nimrod created both of them. And they all spoke one language and resolved to mount aloft into the starry heaven. But on the air, the immortal, that's God, straightway puts a mighty force. And then winds from above cast down the great tower and stirred mortals up to wrangling with each other. Therefore men gave to that city the name of Babylon. Now when the tower fell and the tongues of men turned to all sorts of sounds, straightway all earth was filled with men, and kingdoms were divided. Now you might wonder who was behind the manipulation of humans in those days. It might surprise you, it's actually the heavenly host. We looked at Heaven's Army several videos ago when we were looking at what heaven looks like and who populates it, who's there as God's staff. The host are his army. But consider here Ephesians 6, 11-2, this exposition. It's quite good. It's by Bruce Langenecker. Paul considers the celestial bodies, also called the elements in Galatians 4, 1-8, to be personalized spiritual forces of some kind, supernatural beings that hold power over human beings. He has in mind the tribal deities that were thought to oversee the nations on behalf of God in Deuteronomy 32, 8-9. But this purpose deteriorated. These same regulating beings are what is meant in Ephesians as cosmocratoris, cosmic rulers. But the metaphor in this word contains an ambiguity. How so? One meaning is to hold, and one meaning is to grab. The host of heaven were in places of authority, and they were supposed to hold things in place to secure us, to keep us safe from the forces of darkness who had fallen with Lucifer in his rebellion, or the Assyrian spirits in his rebellion. But instead, there came a time when the host decided to snatch people instead, to grab people, to overstep, to overthrow, to become the powers, the authorities, the spirits of wickedness in heavenly places, the principalities. These are rebel divine council members who deceive, and they result in people loving injustice and being stirred to incredible violence, to despise God and to worship all manner of other creatures and deities in his place. Think of how in Egypt, in Exodus 12:12, we're told that the Lord not only afflicted the evil Egyptians, but also the gods of Egypt. This is where those gods came from. Deuteronomy 4:19 elaborates, the forces of heaven, the heavenly host, metaphorically the sun, the moon, the stars, lulling people into worshipping them or luring them into bad theology, bad teaching. In the days of the Tower of Babel, heavenly hosts rebelled against God and left their station. They overstepped, and as a result they became the demonic kings and queens that now rule in the second heaven, in the planetary sphere. Genesis 10:24-25 talks about Peleg, whose name means division, because he was born in the days when the earth was divided. That has nothing to do with the landmass breaking into continents in the days of Noah. No. It refers to him being born in the days of the Tower of Babel. Deuteronomy 32:7-9 says, "Remember the days of old, consider the generations long past. Ask your father, and he'll tell you, your elders, and they'll explain to you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, there's Peleg, Tower of Babel, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, heavenly host, in this case, rebellious ones. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, Israel, his allotted inheritance." So in the days of the Tower of Babel, heavenly host came down onto those temple towers, and they lured the people building those temple towers into worshipping them. They stole the hearts of the people. Instantaneously, they were malformed into demons. This is the third time heaven has rebelled against the Lord, the third and final time. And the Lord said, screw it. He created languages, he separates the people, and because the people had turned their back on God and worshipped these demons, God said, "You think they're so great, do you? Fine then. Live under them. Be their slaves. Let's see how you get on." But he always preserves a remnant. And that's when he turned his attention to the land of Ur and said, "Abram, go for a walk. Wherever you go, that will be my inheritance on the earth, your inheritance. You're going to become a mighty nation of kings and priests." Not only do these demons operate in the second heaven, but even under the water on the 3rd of November 2023 at 25 past midnight, God did give me a vision of a witchy creature underneath the water, and I saw a woman who was like lying on a rock on a slab. And the Lord told me, okay, that woman represents the church. She's in incredible distress. And the witchy creature was a demonic witch from the water, from the marine kingdom. And she's a principality of a river or a sea or an ocean. Probably from where I live, probably a river. And she was hell-bent on attacking and oppressing and sucking the living daylights out of the body of Christ in that region. Think of how Jesus chose fishermen to be his disciples at the start, and no matter when they went on the Sea of Galilee, they always encountered a storm or there were no fish. It's not that they were bad at their jobs, they were very good at their jobs. James and John's father had servants, had hired hands. They were quite wealthy fishermen, so they weren't stupid, they weren't idiots, but they were under attack from the forces of evil. But that's a lesson for another day. I'll look at the Marine Kingdom in another video in another series. So Satan's goal is to put a man, a Nephilim, a Gibborim, another Nimrod, back on the throne of a one-world government that he can enter into and rule the earth through. Because the physical world was made for humans, so it has to be a human who brings it to its knees. And in 1 John 2:18, John wrote that particular passage, not even knowing that hitherto a top secret 2000 plus age of grace was about to be divinely introduced. But it's just absolutely phenomenal how what was is going to be again. Because even the Antichrist spirit and man, they bring in a regime that is committed to demonic serving fortresses, which we're going to see in the next episode. And it's all about bringing back in Nimrod, bringing back in the Gibborims. malforming human DNA, human genetics, to make something trans, to stop the seed of the woman. Because the seed of the woman, yes, it climaxed with Jesus, of course, but even Psalm 8, even the cry of babies and infants, can terrify foes, avengers, and demons. That's why the devil tries so hard to have him aborted. He absolutely despises people, because people are more powerful than demons. There's a Disney movie from the 90s, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and there's one part where the villain, Frollo, goes absolutely nuts. And he starts singing, it's not his fault that, he made the devil so much stronger than a man. It's not true. Humans have more power than demons, as long as we have Jesus living inside of us and we take authority over the darkness. We have nothing in common with it. We're not complicit with it. But just as Nimrod brought the people of the ancient world into submission to him, well, in the next video, we're going to see how the Antichrist does the same. So I hope you've learned a lot there. Maybe a lot of that has been new. Maybe heavy, but helpfully heavy. Gloriously heavy, victoriously heavy. And I'll see you in episode 29. We are really and truly well on the way to the end of the series. So I'm so glad you've made it this far. All the best.